right, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to our Fall 2024 series of the Tuesday Times Roundtable. TTR is our Office of Global Learning Initiatives flagship discussion series that brings together multiple perspectives on current issues and trends while fostering meaningful conversations on topics that are aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. All TTR sessions are recorded, and you can learn more about TTR or watch past recordings or come back to this one by visiting go.fiu.edu/TTR. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment to sign in by using this QR code. The link is going to be also listed in the chat, and then this sign-in is what we're going to be using to report the attendance of TTR. Either you're here for a Global Learning Medallion or Honors College engagement points or extra credit from your professor. This is how we track your attendance. Also, the sign-in is going to close at 1 p.m., so make sure that you take advantage of signing in before we close it for the day. My name is Janeri Mendoza Farjun, and I am the Senior Program Coordinator here at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives. A special thank you to our Assistant Vice President of Global Learning Initiatives, Dr. Hilary Lander, who is joining us today, and also our amazing Global Learning team, Program Manager Michelle Saldivar, Assistant Director Connie Penchak, and our graduate assistants Natalia and Jitangeli, and the Assistant Director of Global First Year, Rola Zar. Our team is going to be monitoring the chat section and also the Q&A box. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in there. So if you would like to learn more about the opportunities available at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives, check our programs in our website, goglobal.fiu.edu/students, or come by to one of our peer advising drop-in sessions available in person or online. You may visit them on Wednesday from 10 to 12 p.m. Also, make sure that you follow us in Instagram, where we post all other programs available to engage as a global learning citizen. The link is listed here in also our slide. And for medallion students, make sure that you do a screenshot of the sign-in just to go ahead and add it to your log. So TTR centers on global issues and trends, and is always linked to a New York Times article that continues the discussion. So you can read the article for this week's session at go.fiu.edu/TTR0910. This is because FIU provides everyone with an FIU email address with access to the free digital New York Times. So if you haven't done so already, you may sign up by going on the link accessnewyorktimes.com. Today's sessions is Small Steps, Big Impact, a conversation on nurturing local sustainability relates to SDG number 12, responsible consumption and production, by ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. If you would like to learn more about this SDG, including targets, indicators, and the progress on this goal, check out go.fiu.edu/SDG. Now, officially, we can get started by introducing today's leader, Claudia Anderson, Associate Director and graduate student at University of Miami. Claudia is currently pursuing a master's in urban sustainability and resilience. She graduated with a bachelor's in arts in international affairs from George Washington University and has spent the past 7 years working in international education. She's passionate about environment and advocating for better and more sustainable cities. Welcome, Claudia, to today's Tuesday Times Roundtable. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Janeri. That was a great introduction, and very, very happy to see the number of participants here in today's session. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for everybody. Give me 1 second. All right, so I can show my presentation. Okay, perfect. So today I'm here to cover a little bit about nurturing local sustainability practices and what that means for me in my context. So before we get started, I'm actually just going to ask Janeri to launch a quick poll so that we get a sense of who's in the room with us. And then hopefully I can see the responses. Okay, so it's going to ask you to select who are you and how would you identify yourself? An undergraduate student, a graduate student, faculty, or staff? Okay, great. So it looks like we have mostly undergrads. That's awesome. And some staff. Welcome. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in just a couple seconds. So the next poll that I'd like to launch is about if you can identify or if you know already what sustainability means. Do you already have a definition of sustainability? When you hear it, do you kind of understand already what it means? Or is this like a brand new topic to you? So let me see if I can launch the second one. Hold on. Okay, so when you hear the word sustainability, do you understand what it means? Yes, no, or maybe? Okay, I think people are still okay. So everybody voted. So I'm going to share the results. It looks like the majority have an understanding of what sustainability means, which is great. And those of you that selected maybe, thank you so much for being honest. That's okay. I mean, I think I have a maybe understanding and I am, trying to get my master's in this. So that's totally okay. We're always learning. So now what I'm gonna do is stop sharing this poll and move on to a little bit of an agenda for today. So I'll give you more of an introduction of who I am and how I got to this point, why this matters to me. We'll go over some global examples of sustainability and what different places are doing, and then some local examples here in South Florida. And then hopefully I'll give you some new information about ways and that tips to get involved in this area and how you yourself can make an impact locally. And I'd love to leave some time at the end for some questions. So first, who am I and why am I here speaking to you this afternoon? So just to give you some context about the presentation for today, I'm born and raised in the county of Dade, very proud of that. And as Janeri mentioned, I got my bachelor's from the George Washington University back in 2016 in international affairs, not really knowing what I wanted to do with that. And I stayed living in Washington, D.C., working for a nonprofit, International Education. And I currently work in still in international education, which is, huge passion for me. And I love working with international students. That's how I got to meet Janeri. So it's a field that I really enjoy, but another hat that I wear, if you can sort of, split my personality into two, is protecting our environment and sustainability and promoting that sort of topic. So I am by no means an expert, and I want you to remember that that's the first of two disclaimers is that I'm just starting my educational journey on this, but I think that's okay. And you don't have to be an expert to promote sustainability. Um, so why is this important to me? Like I said, I am currently pursuing a master's. When I wanted to go back to school, I thought, what education track could I pursue that, is the best return on investment for me? And what kind of classes would I love going to and I enjoy learning about? So, I wanted to pursue this program specifically, especially here in Miami, where we have so much abundance of natural resources and precious ecosystems. Actually, these two photos that you see on the screen are two of my favorite places in Miami. I don't know if anyone has a guess for where they are, but I can tell you. So to the left is Simpson Park in the Brickell area, which is preservation of the forest of how Miami first existed before the development. And it's a super cool little like oasis in the middle of all this concrete and Brickell and buildings and city life. And the park is amazing. I recommend if you haven't already to definitely check it out. And then the second picture is if any of you have been to Bill Baggs Park in Key Biscayne, this is a sunset from there, no filter. So there's so much for us to really preserve in our backyard. And for me, the local sustainability, why I choose to study this is because it kind of gives me a little bit of climate anxiety. I don't know if anybody has heard of this term before, but it is a thing. In 2017, the American Psychological Association actually referred to eco-anxiety and gave a definition about it. And I think it's something that, for me and probably for a lot of other people, we kind of have an anxiety associated with climate change and the environment, and it seems like this overarching thing. And so for me, the way that I help manage that is through what I can control, which are my individual actions. So even though we have a lot to, contribute in terms of climate change to these large corporations and countries, I think the way that I help cope is like I have my own agency to make choices in my day to day, right? So for me, just to give you a little bit of more of a disclaimer, the second one of today, I think when we talk about sustainability and climate change, it's important to recognize that the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions come from a select few of producers, whether that's state-run firms or international companies. So, it's we definitely need to talk about the local impact, but also it needs to be understood that this can be traced to a specific group of producers. So it's really important that we highlight that. This is just an article that I found, and if you want the link to that, let me know. I'm happy to share it, but just want to give that caveat is there is there is some higher blame to give in this conversation. But before enough of talking about that, I do want to go into some global examples of local sustainability essentially, because two-thirds of all global carbon emissions come from cities. So cities have a lot that they can do when it comes to promoting sustainability practices and ensuring that our cities can remain these thriving communities in the future. So the first example I want to highlight is super cool. It's essentially the whole country of Uruguay, which is smaller than a lot of big cities around the world. It's a small nation. I'm not sure if anyone here has been to Uruguay. I was there for like 3 days, so I don't know, or 2 days actually. I don't even know if it counts as a trip, but um, it's a very interesting case study about how a whole country has been able to go to more than 90% of all electricity comes from renewable resources. So back in 2008, they, the country was suffering from a lot of volatility of gas prices, and they wanted to explore a different option that didn't tie them to importing oil because it was, pretty unreliable. The price would go up and down, and a lot of people were being negatively affected by that. So they started to transform the electrical grid back in 2008, and a lot of their power comes from wind and solar. And what's especially curious about Uruguay is they're huge consumers of beef. So, if anybody didn't know this, a huge greenhouse gas contributor is methane, which comes from the production of beef and cattle. So for a country that eats beef very, very regularly, they have seen really no increase in their greenhouse gas emissions because they've been able to go completely, almost completely renewable in terms of their electricity and heat. They've also been able to emphasize like low consumption habits. Their community by nature is, I would say, lower in terms of how much they consume and expend on a day-to-day, just the culture itself. But it is a very interesting case study, and I highly encourage you to read more about that. Okay, then we have Paris. So back in 2021, Paris announced that their plan is to make the city 100% cycle friendly by 2026. So they wanted to really buckle down and kind of discourage the use of cars in the city center, because transportation is a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So the mayor promoted this concept that's called 15-minute city. And what she was saying is, you know, for every Parisian to be able to get access to local services within a 15-minute walk or bike commute. So you have your work in this 15-minute commute, you have access to health services, you have groceries, different, things that you do have in your day-to-day, but without the use of a car. And they've been able to add a lot more bike lanes, but also bike parking and even changing the traffic light patterns to accommodate cyclists. So this has been really successful, and obviously you can't completely ban cars from Paris. I think that's a little unrealistic, but there are tools that you can use to encourage people to take alternate forms of transportation. The third is Philadelphia, so a little closer to home. They've also published a report on how their buildings and different industries account for 75% of the city's carbon emissions. So a lot of cities calculate their own carbon emissions, and they've published basically an action plan for how to combat that and reduce their emissions. And they've been investing a lot in green infrastructure. They have been electrifying their municipal fleet. So all this, the city government cars that they have, even the buses, they're transforming them to completely electric and implementing different programs for residents to switch to EVs has been really, really successful. So that's another example. And then I wanted to show this video, which is another example of Copenhagen. Whoops. And bear with me as I
That's the
switch to the video.
line for,
What's that?
are you in the line?
Okay. Sorry, I thought there was a question. So I'm gonna play just like a minute or two of this video because it's longer. But you're more than welcome to see the whole thing afterwards. I can paste the link, but it's a really interesting example of Copenhagen and how they've been promoting sustainability. So here we go.
Not surprising to learn that 2/3 of the world's carbon emissions come from cities. That number is getting worse as more of us move into cities, which means a higher demand on infrastructure and resources. So Copenhagen is on a mission to cancel out all of their carbon emissions.
My name is Frank Jensen. I'm the Lord Mayor of Copenhagen. When I became mayor, we started this process. We decided that we would want to become the first carbon neutral capital city by 2025.
What does carbon neutrality actually mean? For a city, it's creating more renewable energy than the dirty energy it uses. It's all about achieving a net zero. And their plan is focusing on mobility, pollution, and energy.
We have introduced a lot of new solutions in Copenhagen. Our bicycle infrastructure is world famous because today 62% of the Copenhageners use the bike for daily transportation.
Everyone in Copenhagen bikes, and I mean everyone. So the city is leaning into that. In the last 10 years, it has invested nearly $300 million to improve biking infrastructure. All that money is paid off. There are more than 5 times the amount of bikes than cars in the city. That goes a long way when cutting down on carbon emissions. But the effort doesn't stop there. Copenhagen has totally transformed their waterways too. Only a few decades ago, the harbor was contaminated with industrial waste, oil spills, even dead fish.
When I moved to Copenhagen back in 1987, this harbor was so polluted you could never dream to have a swim in this harbor. But today you can swim. We have a harbor bath where people can have a swim with their kids after school or after job.
Though Copenhagen has made huge strides with their mobility and pollution efforts, by far their biggest focus is on energy use. It makes up about 80% of their carbon neutral plan. To cut down on their consumption, Copenhagen uses one of the world's largest and most successful district heating systems. It works by using a network of pipes to capture leftover heat from electricity production, then delivers that heat to homes across the city.
99% of all households in Copenhagen are linked to our very efficient district heating system. We have also introduced district cooling, where we take the cold out of the water in the harbor and distribute cold in pipes beside the district heating pipes. So you can reduce temperature in buildings, in server rooms, in factories. We can reduce electricity use for cooling down buildings with 70%.
All right, so hopefully that was informative. I know there's a lot that is out there in terms of sustainability in different cities around the world. So these are just a few global examples, and you can probably have a class, dedicated to each one. So now I'm going to bring it back. We've traveled around the world, and I'm going to bring it back to the local landscape. So these are just some ideas and from my personal experience. But I really think that building a sustainable future is at your fingertips. So what I thought of when I moved back from Washington, D.C. In 2019 to Miami, I didn't have a lot of experience in this space in terms of professionally, but I had other strengths that I could leverage to contribute to the cause. So, I've considered myself someone that's very motivated, I'm socially driven, and you have power as a constituent. So I had those three things, and that led me to volunteer with this organization called Transit Alliance Miami. I'm not sure if anybody has heard of them, but if you have, feel free to let me know in the chat. I'd love to connect later and maybe we can talk more about it. But it's essentially a nonprofit organization that advocates for walkable streets, bikeable neighborhoods, and better public transit. I had come from Washington, D.C., which I never had a car the 6 years or 7 years I was living there. And it was a completely liberating feeling to not be tied to this like four-wheeled machine. And I wondered, why had Miami developed as it had? Like, why did you need to have a car in Miami and not in DC? So I volunteered with this organization, and they have a couple projects. I'm just going to highlight one today, which is the Better Bus Network. And the goal of the Better Bus Network was to redesign the whole bus system. So ridership had been consistently falling over the past 5 years, and this was the first redesign in over 40 years for the bus network, which is crazy because if you think about 40 years ago, our city has changed so much, but the bus system hadn't. And it was a really great project because it had been community driven and there was a ton of advocacy work at the local level done to bring in those comments for how to improve it. I helped, survey a lot of riders. I gave public comments at the Board of County Commissioners, which is located in downtown. And thankfully, after all that hard work, it was implemented in November 2023. So another campaign that they have is called the Build It, Bike It campaign. So this is a map here of the bike routes in Miami. So if you see the red is conventional or unprotected bike lanes, just the ones that you see that have like a separate lane dedicated to them on the road. And then the blue, the very little blue, like here by this section is protected or buffered bike lanes, which means that there's a designated separation between the, like a physical separation between the car and the bike lane. So this campaign, it was essentially to address that in 2009, the city of Miami adopted a comprehensive master bike plan, but to this day, they have still not completed it. And there's only one protected bike lane. And there's a disconnected, if you look at this map, it's all disconnected. So that's another campaign that they're working on. And just a little bit more about my work with them. So like I said, I was a volunteer. These are some of the staff members in the photo, but what I did was serving riders. So you just dedicate a couple hours to ride the bus and interact with people and get their comments and submit that to be reviewed. I also went to the Board of County Commissioners to give public comments as a citizen or as a constituent, sorry, of the county, which you all have the ability to do that. And then also to complete feedback forms. They would send emails and I just, would complete them if I had feedback about the transit service and write to our local and state reps, which I'll cover that in a little bit later. The second kind of way that I integrate sustainability into my day-to-day is through compost. Is anybody here currently a composter? I don't know. Or maybe this term is new. But basically when waste is sent to landfills, the decomposition of that waste leads to methane and carbon dioxide emissions, which, negatively impact the environment. And composting is such like a simple thing that you probably don't even think about that you can do every day. I'm sure you have, with your how you eat, there's so much food waste that could be retransformed. And in some places, composting is actually a part of the city's waste operation. So just how you have a trash and a recycling bin, there's also a compost bin. Some cities have mandated that. So just to highlight some things is one fact that really surprised me is that if everyone in the US composted, it would be equivalent to removing 7.8 million cars from the road, which is, that would be a huge help in and of itself. So how can you compost, right? So the way that I do it, I used to do, and this is not a paid endorsement. I do not get paid by any of these companies, okay? So don't let that dissuade you. But the first one, Compost for Life and Renewable, actually, these are two services that you can sign up for, and they give you this bucket. You put in all your discards, and then every couple weeks, you can set it to once a week or every 2 weeks. They come to your house and pick up your compost, your food scraps, and then they make it into soil. And they give that soil to our local agriculture producers. They give it to anybody who wants to buy the soil because the composted soil is super, super fertile. So you can actually do a lot with that. Maybe if you have your own garden, you want to make it into, you want to use your compost for your own garden. Some people even compost like the whole process at home. So they take the food scraps and they make it into the soil in their backyard. I live in an apartment, so I can't do that. But if I had a backyard, I would totally do that whole process from home. The only thing to note is that these are services that do charge. So you would need to pay for them to come and pick it up. So what I had been doing is there's another place called Verde Market. And they used to, I just learned that this past weekend they stopped doing it, is that you could drop off your compost there and it would charge you like a little bit less of a fee, and take your food scraps and turn it into composted soil. Unfortunately, they stopped doing that, but there are community drop-offs for Compost for Life and Renewable. If you instead wanted to just drop it off, instead of having them come to your house, which for me, I'm a household of two people. Like, I don't produce that much compost for them to come every 2 weeks, to be honest. If you have more family members in your household, the 2 week time window makes a ton of sense. But the Verde Market is also a zero waste store. There's a location in South Miami, and then there's a location in Midtown, and I believe also in Fort Lauderdale. And you bring your own containers and you fill up your, let's say you want, I don't know, peanuts. You fill up your container with peanuts and they charge you by the weight so that you don't have to buy a new container. You're not throwing away a container. You're not throwing away those bags when you go to the grocery store and you buy produce, those green bags that, why do you even need? I don't even understand why you need them. You can just bring your own bags and you contribute to a lot less waste. Something else that I wanted to just highlight is this is a local sustainability solution. I haven't been involved with it like personally, but I've used it as a community member, which if you haven't already, I definitely recommend checking it out. They're currently constructing under the Metro Rail a mixed use multimodal urban trail. So you can ride your bike, you can walk, you can run. And it's going to connect Brickell all the way down to Dayland South, which is right under the Metro Rail line, which is great because it's using up all this space into something where you can use it as a commute, you can use it as a health benefit. And something else that I really love is that they use it as a stormwater management with native plants and rock beds. So they'll plant, you can actually see it if you walk along, a bunch of different plants that help with the flooding. They are native plants that absorb all that extra stormwater and help the flooding not accumulate. Okay. So now we'll get into getting involved, and I'm almost done, I promise, because I know I want to leave room for Q&A, but these are just some tips. If you have any others, I'd love to take them from you. But basically, the first one I wanted to highlight is the Miami-Dade County Office of Resilience. So I believe the city of Miami also has an office, but the county government has an office dedicated to resilience and sustainability. So that goes to show that at least at the county level, they're, thinking about this, they're prioritizing it, and they have different programs for sustainability initiatives in Miami. They have something called Sustainable Buildings Program, which is like for energy efficiency of buildings. They have programs that tackle sea level rise and flooding, which here in Miami is super, super imperative. They have a greenhouse gas inventories program and other initiatives to help protect Biscayne Bay. If you haven't already, you can sign up for their newsletter. Let me see if I can paste the link. Well, I can paste it after, but they're also a great social media follow. I highly recommend following them on Instagram because whoever runs that account they have some funny content. It's great. And they make sustainability fun because it can kind of be like this doomsday type of topic, but it really doesn't have to be. So that's one tip that I have is getting involved with this office. Then secondly is public action and advocacy. So you as a constituent have so much power. You have to hold your leaders accountable because their focus should really be on community needs and concerns. And I would tell you that, find an issue that really resonates with you because getting involved as a citizen is key. For me, the issues that really like spoke to me were public transit and combating waste and composting. But for you, it might be cleaner oceans or renewable energy. Like there's so much under the umbrella of sustainability where if you can just find like the thing that you are most passionate about, start researching from there. I think it's easier to like pin it down to something smaller and contribute in that way. And you can find different resources at the city level, at the county level, at the state level. Like there are degrees of involvement that you can have. Okay. And then something else that if you have the time to do is really important is to attend any community meetings, town halls. These are going on usually monthly, I would say. But if not, you can always contact your local leaders. Find out who they are. Who's your county commissioner? Who's your city council person? Who's your state representative? These are all names that you should know because how they vote affects you. Even if you might not directly feel it, um, it affects everybody. So if, I would the knowledge is power, and the more that you're informed, the better. These are just some organizations I have here on the screen that deal with topics of sustainability and getting involved. Miami Waterkeeper is really great. Their focus is on Biscayne Bay. Catalyst Miami and Miami Freedom Project have several different topics that they focus on. But you can check them out. Subscribe to local news sources. That's a big one. So sometimes I get overwhelmed looking at global headlines. It's easier for me to kind of condense everything to the local level. So you can subscribe to local sources. And then the last 2 points, if you remember anything from this presentation, please remember these last 2 points. Empower others and share knowledge, right? Because you have a lot at your disposal and a lot of knowledge to share once you've done all this research about a topic that interests you. Tell it to a friend, tell it to a family member, tell it to anybody, because you don't know if they themselves will also kind of get get inspired by that and choose another topic too, and then it becomes like a domino effect, right? We shouldn't gatekeep any of this knowledge, because the more people that feel passionate about this, the better. Um, and then that leads me to my last point, which is to vote. I know you probably hear this a ton being in college, but it really is a super important aspect of citizen involvement. And what I want to leave you with is that your voice matters. So if you look at this headline from the Herald, this primary election cycle, I think it was over like 70% of Miami-Dade voters wanted to expand rapid mass transit. Like that was a question on the ballot. And what came from that is the county budget was going to take away $16 million from transit projects. And because of the results of that poll, they put it back. So, you know, your voice matters. And even though it may feel like you're just checking a box when you vote, the um the summation of everybody's voices together definitely makes change happen. So that was my last slide. So thank you very much for your attention and participation today. I'm happy to open it up to any questions that people may have, or if you need links, you know, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for such a amazing presentation, and also for putting this conversation as well in our audience for today's TTR. We did get one question, and it was about how to be involved in the Miami Transit Alliance. So we have some students that are interested in getting guidance on how to join. So you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad to hear that there's some interest. So I'm gonna put their link in the chat. I don't work for them, like I said, but they have I believe it's a volunteer form that you can fill out, and you can also sign up for their newsletter. That's how I heard about their different initiatives. Is if you sign up, and then they usually send out information about when they need volunteers. With time in advance, you can sign up for a shift if they're surveying, or taking part in their online campaigns. So yeah, I would say you can sign up through their website, and then you can follow them also on social media to see anything that they're promoting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claudia. And then another question that just popped up while you were talking about the experience and what you had done to be a more sustainable citizen is in regards to community gardens, because I had seen them a lot around Philadelphia. And I don't know if that's something that you have been involved in, or something that you can provide some information on how we can participate in any of those community gardens on the local level.
Yeah, that is a good question. So I don't personally participate in a community garden. I used to when I lived in DC as well. But I know there is, I'm trying to think of the organization's name. They usually go to the farmers market in Legion's Park, and they have a community garden. I think it's in North Miami though. Um, but my 2 cents would be is that if you don't have one nearby or accessible to you, you can, get a couple friends and start one. Find out from at the local level what you need. Maybe that's, a space in your community that's being underutilized. I'm sure it just takes one person to ask the question. I'm sure people have never thought about it, and that's why there isn't one. But I think it's Little River Cooperative is the name of the farm, and they have a nursery too, and they might be able to point people to the right direction for community gardens. But that's a great idea, great initiative.
Awesome. And then we did get another question in the chat as well from one of our students. And the question is more on the economic effect So what will be the economic effect of society undertaking a global mass conversion from using fossil fuels and as its main resources of energy and more sustainable sources, such as wind or water? And then the follow-up question on that is, will this disrupt the general flow of markers as they will have to adapt their machinery, technology, and manufacturing processes to accommodate this sustainability? Very good
Yeah,
question.
that is a great question and something definitely to think about. Unfortunately, I'm not an economist, so I don't have like a breakdown of exactly how that would play out. It's definitely a question that's looming in the field because the big discussion is, yes, we want to go renewable, we want to change, our sources of electricity, but we don't want to change the way that we're living. So that's a huge dilemma is like, how do we make that transition without losing the comforts of how we live now? Because asking people to change, I think, is unrealistic. Um, from the example in Uruguay, from what I've read, again, I'm not an expert. They mentioned that switching to renewable may have come at the cost of growth. So it is a more expensive option right now. But what I would say to that is there's a ton of investments, in the renewable energy space that are already going on. And there's a lot that can be gained from divesting in fossil fuels and investing in renewable. The problem is that I think the status quo as it is right now, no one really wants to change, and the big players are still invested in fossil fuels. Like the big companies that you think of um, have a seat at the table still. So I think, that's a huge issue, and we might have to um, we might have to come to terms with the fact that growth will slow a little bit, but is that something that we're willing to manage for the long-term benefits of maintaining our planet, having a sustainable way of life, living healthier, right? Because all those carbon emissions also are not good for your health. And these global heat waves that we're seeing, these intensified natural disasters, like there is reason to invest in them. And I think there's cons for staying the way that we're doing right now. But the good thing is that like I said, there's a lot of work being done in that field. Um, and more companies come out of investment in renewable energy sources, right? You're just creating a new industry. So that's my like baseline answer because again, I'm not an economist, but that's how I see it.
Thank you, Claudia. And I do have just one last question. So as a citizen living more sustainable, what does that how does that change your lifestyle? So can you share with us like the process on how it started, and then also now after years of being a sustainable citizen, how does that change your lifestyle when being a consumer and so on?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, no one is perfect. Okay, I'm the first one to tell you, like, I'm not a sustainability perfectionist. Like, there's no way we can't strive for it.
I will make the math right
Um,
now. So they didn't give
I
us a
still
receipt.
eat meat. I think like the most sustainable option would be to be vegetarian, right? Because of the carbon emissions from methane. But I think in terms of the lifestyle, there are choices that you can make that may be pretty simple that you haven't thought of. So for me, like my parents, for example, live 1 block away from CVS. Do they walk to the CVS? No, they drive to the CVS. So I think implementing like a little something like that, like, do you really need to take your car today? Could you possibly take public transit? Do you want to even have to find parking? Like, is public transit a better option? Granted, there are problems with the system. But I think if they see more ridership, that might entail more funding to fix it. And then In terms of my shopping habits, you know, I try whenever possible to shop local, and shop at smaller size businesses that don't have such a huge carbon footprint. I know it might be more expensive, and I fully recognize that that's like a privileged answer. Um, but maybe that means I save money by, you know, I stop doing something else, or like I don't go out to eat as much. So it's about balance and about prioritizing like how your dollar is basically your vote. Like how you spend your money is how you're telling the world that you support certain things. Um, so, you know, it might take a little bit because it is a mindset shift, but it's not impossible. And I think there are small ways that you can integrate it into your everyday. Like, you know, I think the thing that's taken off the most is like the reusable water bottle. Now everybody uses that. And probably, I don't know, 30 years ago, like that wasn't as popular. But that, you know, it does make a difference in the aggregate. So it's not impossible, but it does take some thinking and dedication.
I have a question too.
Okay.
So in other states in the US and most countries in Europe, they don't give plastic shopping bags anymore at the grocery stores.
Yeah.
Is there a conversation in Florida right now to stop that, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I would love for that to be the case here, to be honest. Like, I know, for example, in Germany, like it's illegal or not illegal, but they don't even give you bags. Like no supermarket will have plastic bags. Um, in
Aldi
some
does that here though, because it's a German company.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Aldi is a good example. Yeah, I shop at Aldi. I don't think that's in conversation. I know some stores have like a different incentive. Like for example, Sprouts gives you a discount if you or is that Target? Target gives you a discount. I think Sprouts also has something like that. Um, I just think here in Florida, like Publix is like the biggest supermarket and grocery store chain, and I don't haven't seen that be a priority. I mean, not to call them out, but like I honestly haven't seen that. I think with more public pressure, it can be a thing. At least having like the option for what's it called? The paper bags, because paper bags you can recycle. And actually some stores, if I'm not mistaken, have like a bin where you can bring your bags back to the store, the plastic bags, and they recycle it or reuse it for you. I believe actually Publix does have that. So, you know, there are different things that they're integrating. A complete ban, I don't know if I see that in the future, but that's a good tip though for bringing that up. Bring your own bags to the store. Because how many of you have like under your sink a huge thing full of plastic bags that you've never seen the end of? That's me. So that's one way to fix it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we also got one comment in the chat from the Office of Sustainability. So just wanted to also bring it up. We do have a community garden initiative here on campus, Adopt a Plot program at FIU Nature Preserve. Make sure you check them out as well. Desiree was very kind to put the contact information from the Office of Sustainability. I really appreciate it, Claudia. Any other questions? Please feel free to start putting them in the chat. I'm just going to share one last slide, and then we continue coming through the rest of the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Desiree. That's a great point. Appreciate that.
All right, so for next week, we would like to remind everyone that you can also sign up for another online session. Next week, we're going to be discussing empowering change, implementing solutions in developing context. For an FIU alumni in the field of global affairs, who is going to be joining us from Egypt. He works at the University of Cairo. So we want to make sure we also have a conversation as well. And if you're interested, feel free to sign up already. And also, if you have any suggestions on future TTRs, we also do have a link we're going to put the link in the chat, but you're able to provide us with your feedback as we start pulling together the series for the spring 2024. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing screen to see if we got any other questions coming in.
I had one more question
Yeah.
about climate anxiety. Like, I haven't really like read research about it, but is it more of what's affecting young people or like the newer generations, or does it also affect like the older generations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I haven't delved too deep into it either, but from what I understand, it's like a top anxiety reason for like millennials and Generation Z. I think that with like social media has really taken a toll. Um, and I mean, not to say that, the other generations don't feel it, but I think we're getting served a lot more of that, especially like for the younger generation. So, yeah, it's a thing, and I never really like thought about it until I came across the term, and yeah, I mean, I think it's going to affect a lot of us, especially like future generations that don't necessarily have a way to define it yet. Um, but yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have friends who actually like don't want to have kids because of
Mm-hmm.
the anxiety. Yeah, that's
Yeah. And like when I talk to my parents about it, that are obviously a different generation, my dad's like, oh, well, when I'm gonna feel the effects of that, I'll be dead. So he like completely has alienated himself from the conversation. I think some people might agree, like they don't see it as tangibly. But like for me, that I go to the Biscayne Bay and I see like we see the reports of like die off of fish and all this stuff that it's happening in real time, how is that going to affect future generations in 10, 20, 30 years? So, yeah.
thank you.
All right, Claudia, thank you very much for your time, for sharing your experience on this very important topic. With this, I think we conclude our TTR for the day.